the Prime Minister has repeatedly said they don't want vaccine passports. Michael Gove, the Cabinet Office Minister who's now been put in charge of this review, has, simple questions. Kate Burley on Sky a while back when she was still on telly, was being asked, are we going to have domestic vaccine passports for domestic use? No. Is anyone going to be required to have one? No. There was no, we're looking at it. No. The government's repeatedly said no. And now they're looking at how to do it. And we know they spent more than £400,000 giving grants to companies to look at how to provide the tech, the apps to make these possible. Do you think it's inevitable it will happen?
I do think it's inevitable. I think there's a lot of pressure from business because it will make things easier and less bureaucratic for them, especially people that do mass events. But also, it looks like they're going to have to invent something like this for us to visit other countries. You mentioned Greece in the on the hour headlines, and so if they're going to invent that, then there may well be easy enough to have it for domestic purposes too.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I completely understand it for international purposes. Countries are entitled to do that. Although that said, maybe an element where, well, if you want an awful lot of young people to come along who very low risk, but less likely to have had the vaccine. It's a bit rich for Greece that hasn't rolled out the vaccine at great lengths to then sort of demand people to be vaccinated when they come to the country. But, we don't have a choice over what Greece does. But let's talk about this now with Silkie Carlo, who's director of Big Brother Watch and joins us once again. Good morning to you, Silkie.
Good morning.
Good morning. The vaccine passport debate, internationally and domestically, I think are very different things, but they do seem to have moved on apace. And when we hear about this review of all the ethical and practical issues regarding vaccine passports, it seems to me that, I would be very surprised if they don't end up happening. Are they now inevitable?
I don't think anything is inevitable in a democracy, but it's starting to feel very much as though we're not living in a democracy. On the face of it, vaccine passports will not work. The reason is we still don't have any evidence about transmissibility in relation to vaccines.
We do have some early data.
There's no conclusive evidence on transmissibility. So at the moment, you would think that the emphasis would be on testing still and on test and trace, on which billions of pounds has been spent, but that seems to be a kind of forgotten project. So really, this is for me a source of enormous embarrassment, and especially to see it basically being championed by people that have called themselves liberals. The idea of this is absolutely ludicrous, that each of us is now treated as like an individual biohazard that has to walk around with a biological risk score and inventory of vaccines that we've had to show whether it's at a supermarket checkout or at a border. It's just absolutely ludicrous. There will be people in society, we have to accept this, who cannot have a vaccination, and we can't cut them out from society.
There can be, people can have legal exemptions. We can have that. The key thing for me is, delighted when my parents were offered the vaccine in their late 70s. Brilliant, wonderful, great, tick it off, great. I will be perfectly happy to get a vaccine myself at the age of 52, but I would defend the right of anyone else who chooses not to get the vaccine, whether it's for medical reasons, philosophial reasons, whether they don't trust it, whatever. I'm all in favour of us educating people about vaccines. I think a lot of the anti-vax views are, frankly, just downright insane. I really do. I can understand people having concerns about a vaccine that is new. I understand that. I think we are able to actually, with education, with information, to actually deal with all of that. But if someone still says, I don't want to have this vaccine, I'm of the view that in a democracy, we don't live in China. I know it feels like it a lot of the time. We don't. That it is not appropriate for the state to make effectively medical treatment mandatory. That seems to me to be wow, we've had our freedoms taken away from us in the last year. But that goes a step further than anything we have ever done in the past. And to me, that is a step into very, very, very dangerous territory.
We are in very, very dangerous territory. And that's how lots of people will be feeling this morning. And that's part of the purpose of this, by the government telling us that it's quite likely or inevitable, this kind of language, that we're going to need vaccine passports to go and do our food shopping or to ever be able to travel again. To most of us, that sounds like you no longer have a choice about what you put into your body, and welcome to this new era of surveillance where you're going to need to show your vaccine ID at every corner. that's terrifying for people. And it's a real shame that the government has to go about things in that way, because this should be a moment of optimism. So many people are taking up the vaccine, much more. Of course, we've got more availability, but more uptake as well than the rest of Europe, including countries that have mandatory vaccines. And this is the thing, when you coerce people, you scare people. And a lot of people are feeling scared right now. It's a very, very dangerous game to play. And it's completely pointless too, because there will be lots of people who will just never buy into this. And my plea to people is, if you feel uncomfortable about this, if you don't want to carry around a vaccine ID, I will be with you. Lots of us are just going to have to say no, because as you've said before, Julia, it sometimes seems like there's no end in sight to this nonsense and this onslaught of authoritarianism. At some point, it's going to take some of us to just say, no, that's enough. We're not having it.
But this is the thing, because I can completely understand if someone says, I want to have the vaccine to know that I'm safe. But once you've got the vaccine and you have got the protection, it's not 100% protection. We don't have 100% protection from anything in this world. We don't have a right, in my view, to demand that other people have a vaccine to protect them. And even if that may actually give you some added protection, you've done what you can do to protect yourself. If you are still too scared to go out to a restaurant or get on a plane, well, I'm so sorry, you're not going to live a full life. But we don't expect this in any other area. And once vaccines are the evidence looks very, very, very strong, where vaccines can effectively make the COVID virus no more dangerous than the flu. Now, the flu still kills. Let's not pretend it's not a serious disease. But then we don't require people to have proof of their flu jab. That's a very different matter, isn't it? And what about the issue of no jab, no job? Where people are being told, we know Pimlico Plumbers has suggested this. Now, I'm very much of the view that I will not use the services of a company. I will, if there is a choice about this, and again, the government would have the power to stop there being a choice about this. They could make this illegal. I'd be surprised if it isn't already illegal and not discriminatory, actually. But if a company says, we won't employ someone, we will force people to have a jab to have a job, I won't use their services, because I don't like that sort of invasiveness in people's lives. I mean, if someone insists that people have a test to prove that they're safe to go into someone's home, that's fine. That's non-invasive in lots of ways. Where do you think the legal situation would stand on that, to actually say to people, we need to know your medical history in order to give you a job where you're not working in a care home or in the NHS, you're just working in a burger takeaway maybe?
Well, I'm really glad you've said that. And likewise, I wouldn't use a company that discriminated against people in that way. And I think lots of Big Brother Watches supporters wouldn't. And it would never stop at coronavirus. Yeah. Of course, it will go on to flu jab. Of course, it will go on to MMR. God knows where else it would go. This is a very, very dangerous path. Of course, it raises discrimination issues. And I've debated the boss of Pimlico Plumbers about this. They have not thought at all what they're going to do for people who are medically unable to receive a vaccination, or pregnant women, for example. Yeah. It's just a complete afterthought. And that is so symptomatic of the danger of the kind of society that we're becoming, where we just actually don't care about marginalized people. We don't care about minorities. There's this kind of just complete focus on this one issue above everything else at the expense of people's rights. Yep. That is not sensible. It's not rational. It doesn't work. And we've got to reject it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Silkie Carlo, director at Big Brother Watch. To bring Benjamin Butterworth back in, who's joining me all this morning. Benjamin, I thought on a much more glib basis, rather than the big sort of ethical and moral dilemmas over this, one of the things that I think would be really, really would make a lot of people very unhappy is the idea of, say, like Greece allowing people to travel once we are allowed out of our own country, because we still are in North Korea territory, being banned from actually leaving our own shores without the government giving us permission. But once we're allowed to travel, and say a country like Greece says, yeah, you can come here if you've got a vaccine proof. Where you've got a bunch of people my parents' age, or even in their 60s, maybe even me, over 50, I'm able to go and get my vaccine passport, and I'm able to go off and travel on holiday. And people in their 20s and 30s who haven't been offered the jab, who are perfectly healthy and perfectly safe from such low risk from coronavirus compared to anyone else, whose lives have been completely torn apart and ruined for the last year, they won't be able to travel when they've been kept inside their homes to protect the over 70s. The over 70s are off to the beach with the cocktails in Greece, while people, say your age, in their 20s, stuck at home. That doesn't feel right to me.
I mean, it's certainly not ideal, to be honest. I mean, who'd have thought a year ago that it would be sort of cruise ships that would be the first holidays to fill up with,
Yeah.
lots of pensioners. But I think the fact is that if you talk about lots of these things, you should have a system where either, in my opinion, you have the passport or you can get tested if you haven't yet had the vaccine or have chosen not to play along with the vaccine. And I think that would be a sensible system. And if countries that want to get British tourists back were to go with that, I think that would make more sense. Of course, last summer, I went on 2 trips. They were both work-related overseas. And obviously, I hadn't had the vaccine. And so it worked fine then because the R number, the number of cases was so low, the risk was much lower. So I don't see why we can't come to that sort of conclusion this summer as well.
I don't see the point of the vaccines if you then need vaccine passports. It seems to me it's one or the other, but there we are.